if you just look at Denmark, Denmark has been a British satellite for 200 years. The last time Denmark was independent was when they had their own fleet. And that was destroyed by Lord Horatio Nelson, right, the guy who won the Battle of Trafalgar. We've just had the 200th of his death, right, this past year.
Right.
He came in with a sneak attack and destroyed and burned the Danish fleet. And he was asked, why did you do it? And he said, it was the only massive warships left in Europe that could have fallen into the hands of Napoleon, so I had to make sure that I destroyed them. The Danes have never recovered from that. They've never been independent, and therefore when you see something coming out of Denmark, it's like saying Tony Blair did it. So I think maybe that puts the whole thing in perspective.
That does bring a very sharp and refined line to it all. I had no idea the connection. Interesting.
Now, the other side of it is, on the Arab side, now my documentation here is less, and it's a series of hints. But if you remember in the Iranian Revolution, you had this phenomenon called the Renta Mob back in 1978, 79.
Right.
It was possible to put together with, a little bit of money or a few threats or a few words here in different intelligence services, you could assemble a fairly significant mob and carry on a riot with very little preparation. And it looks to me like that's what has been done now in places like Lebanon, Syria, Iran, and elsewhere. In other words, that there's pre-concert, there's a conspiracy on the Western side. We've been talking about that in some detail. But that there's also a parallel effort being made by whatever the British have, whatever the U.S. has, whatever the Mossad has, in places like Damascus or Tehran. And indeed, there may be political forces in Tehran who think that this is a great thing.
Right.
I think they're very wrong. But it's clear that there's very little spontaneous about this. In other words, the irony of this whole thing is people are ranting and raving about freedom and freedom of the press and journalistic expression. What the whole thing expresses is the pervasive control of very sinister, secret intelligence agencies over the reality that we see in the world. To me, that's the overwhelming point. This is all the work of various kinds of spooks.
Agreed.
Of all different kinds. Now, that would then have the lesson, I think, for somebody, if you happen to be an Arab or a Muslim, the question is, this is a provocation. This is designed to be the red flag for the bull. This is designed to elicit riots. It's designed to cause a backlash then in Europe. They want to bring to the surface the racist and colonialist heritage of Europe, right? The anti-foreigner sentiment there, which is very strong, and make that go off the deep end and to the point where it's going to be easier for these countries to either vote money or troops or diplomatic support for the attack on Iran, which is now pretty much upon us. So my word to the Muslims and the Arabs is you cannot accept provocations. You've got to realize what is being done, and don't go for the red flag, right? Go for the matador. Don't go for the cape. Go for the matador. And in that regard, I tried to put in my article, the guy who's been the clearest on this is Mahathir Mohamad, the former Prime Minister of Malaysia, who did a very good job defending his country back in 1998 when he put in currency controls, and generally the Malaysian currency fared better. Malaysia in general fared much better than anybody else in that big Asian contagion crisis, so-called. And what Mahathir has been saying for many years is, if you don't like the way the U.S. and the British are running the world, then do something about that. And the way to do that is dump the dollar. Right? Set up some kind of a parallel alternative monetary system. We could discuss the details. And then you really will have struck something important. You will have done damage to the ability of the U.S. and the British to manipulate the world in the way that we've seen. And I would say that's the answer ultimately. In other words, don't buy into this dynamic, right? That you have these scurrilous cartoons. They're also the cartoons themselves are idiotic. They're not clever. They're not funny. They're not worth it. And it's a very obscure publication. And realize that be it the cartoons and the spread of the cartoons and the riots on the other side is all fixed. It's all fake, hoked up.
Correct. How successful was this operation?
I'm afraid it's been quite successful in the sense that you now have all kinds of people. If you watch the German news, they're saying, well, we We're thinking now we're going to have retaliation against different countries. If they attack the European Union, we're going to cut off aid. And this is significant because the European Union aid budget in Germany is percentage-wise much higher than the U.S. The U.S. is pretty much a vagrant in these matters. I think you'll be able to show, you can test it in a couple of ways. One is with the Hamas question. There's agitation on the part of the Israelis and others that if Hamas refuses to accept Israel's right to exist, then the European Union should cut off all aid. Now, the problem with that is that's genocide, because the Palestinians are kept in this Bantustan ghetto of Gaza and the West Bank. They have no jobs. They're living, in effect, off foreign aid, such a life as they have. If you cut that off, you're basically saying, kill them. And, of course, there's also the irony. If Israel wants Hamas or the PLO state to recognize Israel, then why doesn't Israel recognize the PLO state? If you want to do this, do it reciprocally. Then you might have a case. But that's never the question. So if Israel says, we want you to recognize us and renounce terrorism, the PLO, the Palestinian state can say, we would like you to recognize us, please, in decent borders, and we would like you also to stop your targeted assassinations, which to us are terrorism.
Right. All right.
So the question is, what will Europe do on that?
Mm-hmm.
That would be one.
That's a good question. All right. Back in a minute. Will it be a nuclear war? Will it be a tactical, off-the-shelf kind of standard war attack on Iran, or both? Will they use depleted uranium in any case? Yes. Will Iran become a depleted uranium graveyard, as has Iraq and Afghanistan and Yugoslavia? Yes. How long does depleted uranium remain deadly and fatal to those who inhale and ingest it? 4+ billion years, older than the planet Earth and our solar system. Back in a minute.